Hello, my friends. Stay to the end and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to wander through a museum alone at night. But there I was, flashlight in hand, walking through the cavernous halls of the city's oldest museum. Most people thought it was beautiful, a shrine to history and art, but to me, it had always felt alive. Something about the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the faint smell of aged wood and dust made me shiver. Tonight, I had permission to do research for my thesis, something about ancient artifacts and their psychological impact. The main hall was empty, save for the echoes of my footsteps on the marble floors. Statues loomed over me like silent guardians, their stone eyes seeming to follow my every move. I had always loved museums in the daytime, but at night, they were different. They were hungry. I stopped in front of an exhibit of Egyptian artifacts. The centerpiece was a small, intricately carved sarcophagus. Its gold and lapis lazuli shimmered under my flashlight, but there was something off. The hieroglyphs seemed to move ever so slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them. I shook my head, telling myself it was my imagination. I moved deeper into the museum, past rooms of medieval armor and ancient pottery. The silence was complete, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes every creak or whisper stand out. I reached the section labeled Temporary Exhibits. Tonight, it housed artifacts from a recently unearthed Roman villa. That's when I first heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I froze. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound casual, though my voice echoed unnaturally. No answer. Just the whisper again, curling around the corners of my ears. I told myself it was the building settling, the old pipes. But my rational mind was starting to unravel. I followed the whisper, my flashlight beam quivering across the room. It seemed to come from a small, unassuming display case. Inside were several small figurines, Roman gods, crudely shaped but haunting. I leaned closer, and the whisper became words. "Help! Me!" I staggered back. "Who's there?" My heart pounded. There was no one. The exhibit was empty, aside from the figurines, and yet the whisper persisted, low and urgent, as if the air itself were speaking. I was about to leave when I noticed something strange. One of the figurines, Venus I thought, was no longer facing forward. Its head was turned toward me, eyes somehow alive. I swear I saw its mouth twitch. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking. I needed to leave. I wanted to leave. But then the doors behind me slammed shut with a deafening bang. I ran to them, pulling and shaking, but they wouldn't budge. Panic surged, and that's when I noticed the other displays changing. Statues that had once been still now twisted slightly when I wasn't looking. Paintings shifted, their subjects' eyes following me with malevolent intent. I could feel it. Something ancient, something that had been lying in wait in the museum's shadowed corners. I ran down the halls, trying to find an exit, but the layout seemed to have changed. Corridors that had once led to the main lobby now twisted impossibly, doors appearing where there had been none. My mind screamed that I was no longer in the museum I knew. Then I heard it behind me, a scraping sound like fingernails across stone. I turned, flashlight beam cutting through darkness, and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was tall, impossibly thin, its face a hollow mask, empty eyes staring at me. It moved with jerky, unnatural motions, and with every step, I felt my body grow heavier. "Leave, now!" The whisper became a roar in my mind, but I couldn't move. My legs felt rooted to the marble floor. The figure advanced, and I saw the reason. The statues, the paintings, the artifacts, they were all coming to life. Bronze warriors lunged from their pedestals, portraits twisted, mouths opening in silent screams. The Roman figurines multiplied, their tiny hands clawing at the air. I ran anyway, my flashlight flickering, trying to find any exit. Every hallway now seemed alive, pulsating with shadows that weren't there before. The whispering grew louder, incoherent, chanting. I realized with a sickening clarity that the museum itself was feeding on me, on my fear, my disbelief, my presence. I stumbled into the Egyptian wing again, desperate. The sarcophagus I had admired earlier now lay open, a dark void where the mummy should have been. From it emerged a shadow, a figure so immense it filled the room. I couldn't see details, just darkness, swirling and hungry, reaching toward me. I screamed and turned to run, but the floor beneath me shifted. I fell into darkness. When I woke, I was lying on the cold marble floor of the main hall, daylight streaming through the windows. The museum was quiet. The statues were inert, the paintings normal, the Roman figurines harmless in their glass case. My flashlight lay beside me, dead. I thought it had been a nightmare. My heart still raced, sweat soaking my clothes. I checked my phone. Hours had passed, though it felt like an eternity. I rushed to the exit doors. They opened normally. I stepped out into the sunlight, gasping. For days, I told myself it had been stress, overwork, imagination. I tried to return to my research. I avoided the museum at night, but then I started noticing things, little things. The hieroglyphs in my textbook seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. Roman figurines in my apartment occasionally changed positions. And at night, I hear whispers. Not in the museum, here, in my own home. And sometimes, when I wake, I see shadows moving just beyond the edge of my vision, curling and reaching, waiting. I don't know how it followed me. I don't know why. But I do know this. Whatever is in the museum, it's not content to stay there anymore. I hear it now, whispering from the corner of my bedroom, my own voice echoing back at me. Help me. And I can't move. I had never been a night owl, but that night, something about the museum called me. I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd come in as part of a special research project. Inventory checks, they said. Nothing to worry about, they said. But as I crossed the threshold of the museum's grand entrance, the security guard's words echoed in my mind. You might hear things, but don't panic. It's just the old building settling. The museum was enormous, a labyrinth of galleries and corridors that seemed far more vast than the daytime layout I knew. Shadows pooled in every corner, stretching unnaturally under the dim emergency lights. I tried to focus on my clipboard, taking note of each artifact, statues, paintings, fossils, and rare antiquities, each carefully cataloged. But the minute I stepped into the Hall of Antiquities, something changed. The air felt heavier, almost damp, and I had the strangest feeling that I was being watched. I laughed nervously at myself. Get a grip, Sarah, I whispered. But the hairs on the back of my neck refused to lie flat. It started with the whispers, barely audible at first, almost like the wind moving through cracks in the old stone walls. Then I could hear words, distinct and clear, though no one was there. Sarah, come, closer. I froze. My pen trembled. Who's there? I called, my voice echoing down the empty hall. Only silence answered. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, the stress of working late. But then I noticed something that made my stomach turn. A statue of a woman, a marble piece from the Renaissance, was different. Its head, once tilted modestly to the side, now faced directly toward me. Its eyes seemed alive, shimmering slightly under the flickering lights. I blinked, and it was normal again. A trick of the light, I thought. I shook my head, trying to calm myself, but the feeling wouldn't go away. Every step I took made the shadows lengthen as if they were reaching for me. I decided to check the Egyptian exhibit next. Ancient Egypt always fascinated me. Sarcophagi, amulets, hieroglyphs. Tonight, though, the air in that room was colder, unnaturally so, and the walls seemed to hum. My flashlight flickered as I approached the centerpiece, a small sarcophagus, intricately carved. I felt drawn to it, a pull in my chest I couldn't explain. Then I saw it, an inscription on the side I had never noticed before. It wasn't in hieroglyphs, but in English, carved recently, cleanly. "Do not awaken what sleeps." I laughed nervously. Vandalism? A prank by one of the interns? But as I leaned closer, the words seemed to shift, moving slightly under my gaze, forming a new sentence. "You should not have come." My pulse spiked. I backed away slowly, trying to convince myself to leave. But then I heard a scraping sound from the corner of the room. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand, and saw the shadow first. A figure, black as the deepest night, standing in the corner, motionless. I froze. The figure didn't move, yet I felt its gaze burn into me. And then it stepped forward, or maybe it was the shadows themselves moving. I couldn't tell. My rational mind screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I stumbled backward into a display of Roman coins. They clinked to the floor, metal echoing like gunshots in the empty room. The shadow recoiled, then multiplied. Dozens of them, twisting and contorting, emerging from every dark corner. They moved like smoke, forming grotesque humanoid shapes. I ran. I had to find an exit. But the museum was no longer the museum I knew. Hallways twisted into impossibilities, staircases led nowhere, and doors opened into rooms that shouldn't exist. I heard whispers behind me, calling my name, begging, mocking, crying. I burst into the modern art wing, hoping for sanity, but the paintings were wrong. Faces that had once been abstract now stared at me with living eyes, mouths stretching impossibly wide in silent screams. I covered my ears, but the sound of hundreds of voices filled my mind, overlapping, drowning me in despair. And then I realized the worst part. The artifacts were moving. Statues bent at unnatural angles, glass cases shivered as if breathing, and the shadows were everywhere. They weren't just moving, they were consuming. Slowly, inexorably, they were swallowing the walls, the ceiling, even the light itself. I found myself back in the Hall of Antiquities, gasping, dizzy, as if the museum had brought me full circle. I clutched the marble railing of the balcony and looked down. The floor below was gone. In its place was a void, a swirling darkness filled with whispers and faces pressed against the nothingness. My reflection in a nearby glass case was wrong. I wasn't entirely me. My eyes were hollow, black spirals staring back. I realized then that I wasn't just being hunted. The museum, it was changing me, feeding on my fear, my disbelief, my very sense of self. Panic surged, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away. "Sarah," the voice was soft now, intimate, like someone breathing in my ear. "You belong here." No. I screamed and forced my legs to move, climbing a staircase that seemed endless. The walls pulsed around me, alive, closing in. I burst through a door and found myself in a storage room, stacks of crates, dusty mannequins, ancient furniture. For a moment, I thought I was safe. And then I saw it, a mirror propped against the wall, reflecting the room perfectly. But the reflection wasn't me. It was her, a woman I had never seen before, with eyes blacker than midnight, hair floating as if underwater, smiling at me. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. My reflection, my real reflection, was fading, melting into hers. I screamed, clawed at the glass, and felt something pull me forward. My fingertips brushed the cold surface, and suddenly I was inside the mirror. The room I now occupied was the same, yet different. Shadows moved freely, whispers filled the air, and the woman from the mirror turned to me. "Welcome," she said. Her voice was my own, distorted and hollow. "You've finally arrived." Behind her, the museum stretched endlessly, infinite halls filled with every shadow, every whisper, every artifact I had ever seen. I realized with horror that I wasn't alone. Dozens, maybe hundreds of figures like me were trapped, wandering, screaming silently behind glass walls that didn't exist. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman smiled again, reaching for my face, and then the whispers became a chant, echoing endlessly. The museum feeds, the museum keeps, the museum remembers, and now, so do you. I understood then. The museum didn't just house history, it consumed it. And anyone who entered, anyone who stayed too long, became part of it. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The shadows surged, the whispers enveloped me, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was the woman, my reflection, smiling. And now, if you visit that museum, sometimes in the late hours, you can see me wandering the halls, a shadow among shadows, waiting for the next visitor. Sometimes I whisper your name, but no one ever hears me. Not really. Because once you're inside, you don't leave. I never thought I'd have the kind of job that required me to stay overnight in a museum. Most of the time, security guards just did rounds and left, but tonight I was alone, doing a special inventory check. The museum prided itself on history, from ancient relics to modern art, and I had always loved wandering through it in the day. But nighttime was something else entirely. When the last guard left, locking the heavy double doors behind him, the silence hit me like a physical weight. No hum of the city outside, no distant traffic, just the museum breathing. Or maybe I imagined it. I flicked on my flashlight and started my rounds. The first few rooms were uneventful, medieval weapons glinting in the dim light, glass cases full of jewelry, fossils from eras I could barely imagine. I checked off my list mechanically, but the further I went, the more the shadows seemed to gather. I'd see movement from the corner of my eye, and when I turned, nothing was there. I paused in front of a large painting, a depiction of an old manor engulfed in fog. I didn't recognize the place, and yet staring at it made my skin crawl. Something was off. The figure in the foreground, a woman in a black gown, seemed to shift. Her head was slightly tilted when I first saw her, but now it faced directly at me. Her eyes weren't just painted, they were watching. I laughed nervously. "Get a grip, Sarah." My own voice sounded strange, echoing oddly in the vast hall. I moved on, convincing myself I was just tired. I reached the ancient artifact wing next, where artifacts from faraway lands sat in quiet dignity. There was a peculiar display tonight, a newly acquired set of ceremonial masks from South America. Each was more grotesque than the last, carved from dark wood and painted in colors that had faded with age. As I leaned closer to examine the largest one, I heard it, a whisper, low, guttural, almost like someone speaking through clay. "Take me," I stumbled back. "Who's there?" Nothing, only the faint hum of the ventilation system. My heart raced, but I told myself it was my imagination. The museum was old. It made sounds. Yet, the whisper came again, clearer this time. "Take me with you." I glanced around the display. The mask in front of me seemed different. Its mouth had twisted slightly, curling into a grin. I blinked. Nothing. Just the mask. I decided to leave the wing, but the hallway behind me had changed. Where there had been an open corridor, there was now a wall. My flashlight flickered. I turned to go back, but the masks behind me seemed to lean forward ever so slightly. Panic began to rise. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. The air grew thicker, colder. My flashlight's beam danced wildly as I moved down a corridor I didn't recognize. The museum, it seemed, had shifted around me. Then I saw them. Shadows. Not the kind you expect. The simple play of light on walls, but dark, writhing shapes crawling along the floor and walls. They moved like liquid, forming humanoid shapes, but with impossible angles. They were silent, yet I could feel them watching, feeling, wanting. I ran, my footsteps echoing as if chasing me. Hallways twisted unnaturally, doors opened to rooms that shouldn't exist, paintings shifted, their subjects turning to glare at me. Even the marble floors seemed alive, veins of black creeping like ink. I stumbled into a room filled with glass cases, small statues of gods and warriors, some no larger than my hand, were perfectly still until I got closer. Then they began to move. Tiny fists raised, mouths opening in silent screams. They clambered against the glass, pressing faces to the surface. I vomited against the floor, terrified. A noise above me made me look up, a chandelier swinging violently, though there was no breeze. And in the shadows, I saw them. Figures draped in long robes, featureless faces floating just above the floor. One of them pointed at me. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted again, heading for what I hoped was an exit. Every step felt like wading through water. The walls closed in, then stretched infinitely. I passed a mirror, and my reflection was wrong. My eyes were black, the white stained red, and my mouth moved before I did. I screamed, but no sound came out. Then I realized something horrifying. The museum wasn't just haunted. It was alive, feeding, and I wasn't a visitor. I was prey. I turned a corner into a new exhibit, a recreation of an old Victorian street with mannequins in period clothing. I thought I saw a child among them, waving at me. I reached out, and the child's face twisted, revealing a hollow mouth filled with teeth. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp, which shattered and sent sparks across the floor. The mannequins began to move, slowly, deliberately. I ran down the street, the mannequins following, their wooden limbs creaking like breaking bones. I darted into a small room at the end, but the door slammed behind me. The walls were lined with portraits, each one of a person whose eyes followed me with growing malice. I could feel them whispering now, hundreds of voices overlapping. "You can't leave. You can't leave." I pressed myself against the wall, trying to slow my breathing. My flashlight was dead. I was surrounded by darkness, the whispers becoming screams. Then I felt something brush my arm, a hand, impossibly cold. I spun around. No one was there, but the shadow in the corner grew taller, stretching toward the ceiling. I backed away, tripping over a crate. It toppled, spilling broken artifacts. Among them was a small, carved mask, the one from the South American exhibit. It seemed alive, pulsing slightly. The whispers converged around it, pulling me forward. I tried to resist, but my body moved against my will, drawn toward the mask. As soon as my fingers touched it, everything went black. I woke in a storage room, the first light of dawn streaming through a small window. I was covered in dust, my heart racing, clothes torn. The mask lay beside me, perfectly still. I grabbed it and ran for the exit, never looking back. I thought I had escaped. For days, I avoided the museum, haunted by the whispers in my sleep. But then, in the corner of my apartment, I noticed the mask had moved, a subtle shift, almost imperceptible. And at night, the whispers returned, not just in my dreams, but from the walls, the floors, even my reflection in the mirror. It wasn't just the museum anymore, it was me. I tried to burn the mask, tried to bury it, but each attempt failed. It reappeared, and I began to change. My reflection stares back at me differently now. My voice, even when I speak normally, has a whispering echo I don't recognize. I realized with terror that whatever had taken me that night was no longer confined to the museum. It had followed me home, and it is patient. The other night, I woke to find the walls of my apartment stretching impossibly, dark hallways opening where none should exist. Figures loomed in the corners. The mask was in my hand, though I had hidden it hours before. I tried to tell myself it's temporary, a hallucination, but deep down, I know the truth. I am no longer entirely human. In the museum, it is still alive, waiting, watching, feeding. And now, if I close my eyes too long, I see its halls in my mind, twisting corridors, shadowed exhibits, mannequins in motion. I hear the whispers, always the whispers, and I know that one day it will call me back. And this time, I won't be able to resist. I had been hired to catalog some of the museum's older collections, work that no one else wanted to do. They said it was simple. Check the inventory, note any damage, take photographs. Easy. But the first time I stepped into the museum after hours, I felt it, like the building itself was breathing around me. The main hall stretched into shadows. The marble floors glistened under the faint glow of the emergency lights, but it wasn't enough to make the darkness friendly. Statues of knights and philosophers lined the corridor, and their eyes seemed to follow me. I shook the thought off. Just nerves, I muttered. I started my rounds, clipboard in hand. Nothing happened for the first 20 minutes, but then I noticed a painting, a portrait of the museum's founder, that hadn't been there during my day visits. He looked older than any photograph could capture, his eyes darker, almost black, and they seemed to glimmer when I looked directly at them. I stepped closer, heart thudding. His gaze felt like it was trying to reach into me, probing my mind. I laughed nervously. "Get a grip, Emily. It's just a painting." But the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I moved on. I had to finish the first gallery. Ancient pottery, tribal masks, ceremonial daggers, all mundane until I reached the Egyptian exhibit. The centerpiece was a sarcophagus I'd been asked to photograph. As I approached, I noticed the hieroglyphs were moving, shifting, twisting into shapes I couldn't comprehend. I blinked. They stopped. I told myself it was fatigue. Then I heard it, a soft scraping, like fingernails dragging along stone. I froze, straining my ears. The sound came from behind the sarcophagus. Slowly, I inched closer, flashlight trembling. A shadow emerged, not solid, but darker than the darkness itself, a void among the displays. I gasped and stumbled back. The shadow seemed to stretch, twisting into shapes I couldn't identify. Hands, faces, limbs, but nothing human. It moved toward me silently, gliding across the floor. I ran. My shoes echoed in the empty halls, every step making the shadows shift. It was behind me, always just out of reach, moving impossibly fast. I tried to find an exit, but the hallways were no longer the same. Doors that had once led to the lobby opened into new corridors, twisting impossibly. The museum was reshaping itself around me. I stumbled into the modern art wing, thinking I might find safety among the abstract sculptures. But the sculptures weren't abstract tonight. They were grotesque, distorted figures that seemed to twitch when I looked away. I realized with horror that everything in the museum was alive, watching, waiting. Then I saw it. A mirror in the corner, tall and ornate. My reflection was wrong. My eyes were black, my face stretched unnaturally, my mouth moving before I did. I yelped and tore my gaze away, but my reflection smiled at me anyway. I turned to run, only to find the doors gone. The room had no exit. The whispers began then, low, almost hypnotic. They came from the walls, the floor, the air itself. Hundreds of voices overlapping, calling my name, mocking me, begging me, warning me. I backed into a display case, shaking. Inside were small Roman figurines. I remembered seeing them during the day, innocent, fragile. Now they were crawling against the glass, tiny faces pressing to the surface, mouths opening in silent screams. I felt my stomach churn. A hand touched my shoulder. I spun around. A figure stood there, cloaked, featureless, taller than any human should be. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure pointed to the ceiling. I followed its gesture and gasped. The chandeliers swayed violently, and from them descended shadows, serpentine and alive, reaching toward me. I ran blindly, turning corner after corner. Every exhibit I passed transformed. The Egyptian sarcophagus groaned, stone cracking like bones, paintings warped, figures stepping out into the hall. The museum itself was collapsing into a nightmare of twisting hallways and moving objects. I stumbled into the natural history wing. Skeletons of dinosaurs loomed above me, and I swear their jaws moved as I passed. One of the smaller fossil displays, a saber-toothed tiger, lunged, invisible jaws snapping inches from my face. I ducked, barely avoiding it, and kept running. Then I found the doors. I ripped them open and ran into the lobby, expecting relief. But it was different now. The marble floor had cracks running like veins, black mist rising from them. Statues of past benefactors had fallen, their eyes hollow, staring. The front doors were there, but beyond them, I could see another museum, another version of this one, a city of shadows stretching endlessly, filled with the screams of visitors I would never know. I tried to run anyway. I threw the doors open, only to find myself back in the main hall. Everything was pristine, as if nothing had happened. My flashlight flickered back to life. The portraits, the statues, the exhibits, they were still, normal, silent. I collapsed in the center of the hall, gasping. My hands shook, my heart raced. I told myself it had been hallucinations, stress, too many late nights. I got up to leave. As I crossed the lobby, I passed the founder's portrait again. I froze. His eyes were no longer painted, they were mine. My face stared back at me, blackened eyes, twisted mouth, smiling. I blinked. My reflection in the glass doors confirmed it. I wasn't leaving. Part of me had stayed. Part of me had been absorbed into the museum. And now, it was awake. I ran outside into the early morning light. The city looked normal. The museum stood silent. No shadows, no whispers. But deep down, I knew the truth. At night, when the museum empties and the halls grow dark, I can feel it calling. Not to anyone else, to me. And sometimes, if I pass by the museum on my way home, I swear I see something move behind the glass doors. A figure that is almost me, waiting. I can hear it even now, whispering my name in the quiet. Emily. Come back. I will never go back. I cannot. But the museum remembers. It always remembers. And someday, it will come for me. I never imagined that one simple mistake could cost me so much. It started the night I volunteered to catalog the museum's storage wing. They assured me it was routine, just a quiet room filled with old donations, long-forgotten artifacts, nothing dangerous. I arrived after hours, flashlight in hand, expecting a few dusty boxes and cobwebbed shelves. What I didn't expect was that the museum itself would feel alive. The door to the storage wing creaked as I pushed it open. The air inside was cold, musty, heavy, as if the room hadn't been opened in decades. My flashlight beam caught the edges of wooden crates, some stacked impossibly high, some broken, spilling fragile contents onto the floor. I stepped cautiously, making notes on my clipboard. At first, everything seemed normal. There were old paintings, figurines, ceremonial masks, innocent objects frozen in time. But as I moved deeper into the wing, I started to notice subtle things. Shadows that didn't belong, shapes that twitched just at the edge of my vision. I told myself it was just nerves. Then I saw it. A painting leaning against the far wall, facing away from me, as if it had been hiding. I approached slowly. The back was covered in dust, but faint fingerprints marred the surface. I brushed them off and turned it around. It was a portrait of a man, an unknown benefactor of the museum, perhaps, or maybe someone long dead. His eyes were dark, unnervingly so, almost black, and they seemed to glint as though they were wet. The longer I stared, the heavier the air grew, until my lungs felt like they were filled with stone. I stepped back. My flashlight flickered. A cold draft brushed against my neck. I tried to shake it off. "Just tired," I muttered to myself. But then I heard a sound, soft at first, like distant footsteps. I froze, listening. The room was otherwise silent. I shook my head. "No one's here," I whispered, and then the footsteps stopped, right behind me. I spun around, flashlight swinging. Nothing, just crates and shadows. I exhaled shakily and told myself to focus. I had work to do. I moved toward a large crate in the center of the room, marked with faded letters. Ancient artifacts, fragile. I knelt and opened it carefully. Inside were several small masks carved from dark wood, each with hollow eyes and grotesque expressions. I picked one up. It felt warm, almost pulsing in my hand. A soft whisper tickled my ear. "Take me. Set me free." I jerked my head around. Nothing. I dropped the mask back into the crate. My pulse raced. This was impossible. Masks don't speak. I must have been imagining things. I decided to leave the room and call it a night. But when I reached the door, I found it gone. The doorway had vanished. The wall was solid, smooth, and unbroken. Panic set in. I ran to another section of the storage wing, hoping to find another exit. Every aisle looked the same, crates stacked to the ceiling, shadows pooling unnaturally. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, like hundreds of voices speaking at once. I ducked behind a large statue, heart hammering, flashlight trembling in my hand. I could see them then, shadows forming shapes, humanoid but impossible, limbs stretching, twisting, faces pressing through the darkness. They weren't solid, yet I could feel their weight, their hunger. I ran. Every step seemed to stretch the hallway endlessly. I passed a crate labeled ritual objects and nearly tripped over a small bowl filled with blackened ash. Something inside it stirred like a tiny storm, and I heard the whisper again. "Help. Me." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. Then I felt them. Hands cold and slick, brushing against my arms and legs, shadows crawling over my skin, tugging at me, pulling me toward the crates. I fought, screaming into the empty darkness, but my voice seemed swallowed, absorbed by the room. Somehow, I stumbled into another aisle and found a mirror propped against a crate. I gasped. My reflection, it wasn't right. My eyes were hollow, black voids. My mouth twisted into a grin I didn't make. I stepped back, tripping over a fallen crate. When I looked up again, the shadows were closing in, forming shapes that I recognized. Masks, statues, even the paintings, they were coming alive. They reached for me, faces pressed to the air, mouths opening, teeth snapping. I could feel them trying to pull me apart. I turned and ran blindly, crashing into shelves, spilling fragile artifacts to the ground. The sound of shattering glass was deafening, but it didn't stop. The shadows weren't just chasing me, they were everywhere. They were me. I finally reached what appeared to be a door. I threw it open, desperate. I expected to see the lobby or the street outside. Instead, I fell into a long, narrow hallway, walls covered with portraits. Each portrait stared at me, following me as I moved. And in every one, the same thing. A figure that looked like me, trapped behind the canvas, eyes screaming silently. I ran down the hallway, tripping over shadows that weren't there before, barely managing to stay upright. I reached a stairwell, gasping, shaking, convinced that if I could just find the exit, I would survive. But the stairs didn't lead anywhere. They twisted upward endlessly, spiraling into darkness. I climbed, my muscles burning, heart pounding. The whispers grew louder, now chanting, echoing in my head. At the top, I found a small room. Inside was a single pedestal, and on it, a mask. One I had seen before, in the crate, the one that had spoken. Its hollow eyes seemed to stare directly into my soul. I couldn't resist. My hands reached out. As soon as I touched it, everything changed. The room dissolved around me. I was no longer in the museum. I was somewhere else, a place made of shadows and whispers, where the walls themselves pulsed like living flesh. I could hear countless voices, all crying, screaming, begging. And then I realized they were all people like me, trapped here, pulled in by the museum's hunger. I tried to scream, tried to pull away, but the mask fused to my face, cold and unyielding. My body felt weightless, then heavy, then nothing at all. My mind shattered under the onslaught of whispers. Hours, days. I have no sense of time. I wander these endless halls, following corridors that shouldn't exist, watching other figures trapped in the darkness. I feel the museum in every fiber of my being, and I understand now. It doesn't just display history, it collects it. Every fear, every soul, every visitor who stays too long becomes part of it. Somehow, a part of me remains aware, trapped inside this nightmare, and sometimes I hear the faintest echo of someone entering the museum. I try to warn them, I try to resist, but it's always too late. The museum has already reached them, and I know what's coming next, because now I am the whisper in the shadows. Drop a like if you made it to the end.